The Vrak's communication channels erupted with frantic chatter. Their remaining vessels regrouped, positioning themselves between the Harbinger and the fleeing Ulsari ships. Captain Rice studied the tactical display, her expression hardening. "They're surprised, not scared," she noted, addressing her XO, Commander Dmitry Volkov. "Let's change that equation." Volkov nodded, his scared face betraying no emotion. "Tactical assessment suggests they're calling reinforcements. 15 minutes maximum. Then we work quickly." Rise activated the ship-wide comm. "All hands, combat stations. We're executing Maneuver Thunderclap." Across the Harbinger's kilometer-long frame, crew members moved with practiced precision. The ship hadn't been built on traditional military doctrine. It incorporated lessons from Earth's most brilliant tacticians throughout history, from Sun Tzu to the AI warfare simulations of the 2040s. Lieutenant Santos, weapons systems officer, looked up from her console. "The Vraks are scanning us, Captain. They're trying to identify our vulnerabilities." "Let them look," Rise replied, a cold smile forming. "Initiate electronic warfare package Alpha. Show them what they expect to see." The Harbinger's sophisticated countermeasures projected false readings, phantom power signatures, decoy weapon systems, and structural weaknesses that didn't exist. It was an ancient trick, showing your enemy what they wanted to believe. 3 Vrax cruisers advanced in perfect synchronization, their formation suggesting a hive mind tactical approach. Their weapons charged, targeting the apparent vulnerabilities in the Harbinger's propulsion system. "They took the bait," Volkov observed. "Phase shift on my mark," Rice commanded. 3, 2, 1. Execute. The Harbinger shimmered, its experimental drive system briefly shifting the massive vessel partially out of conventional spacetime. The Vrak's weapons fire passed harmlessly through the ship's phantom image, while the real Harbinger appeared behind the Vrak's formation. All batteries, fire at will. The human warship unleashed its secondary weapons, not the devastating main cannon that had split the dreadnought, but precision railguns and plasma lances that surgically disabled the Vrak's engines and weapons systems without destroying the vessels. "Boarding teams, prepare for deployment," Rise ordered. "I want prisoners and intact systems for analysis." Dr. Nisha Patel, the ship's chief xenobiologist, approached the command platform. "Captain, respectfully, we know nothing about Vrak's physiology or psychology. First contact protocols were written by academics who never saw a genocide in progress," Rise interrupted. "We're not here for diplomatic niceties, Doctor. We're here to stop an extermination." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew the truth behind the Harbinger's mission. Earth had been denied full membership in the Galactic Council for decades, labeled as evolutionarily unsuitable for peaceful integration. Humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too willing to fight for abstract principles rather than material gain. Now those same qualities made Earth the only power willing to intervene when the Council's vaunted diplomatic processes failed. A proximity alert sounded. Long-range sensors detected a massive energy signature, a Vrak's command carrier emerging from hyperspace. "Reinforcements arriving ahead of schedule," Volkov announced. Rais studied the tactical display, eyes narrowing. Interesting. They didn't just call for help. They called for their boss. She toggled the comm system. "All hands, change of plans. We're about to meet the enemy's leadership. Let's make a proper introduction." Chief Medical Officer Sarah Chen monitored the vitals of the affected crew members through her tablet. The quarantine bay's reinforced glass barrier separated her from the 12 personnel exposed to the Vrak's biological agent. What she witnessed defied medical explanation. "Their neural activity is off the charts," she reported to Captain Reyes over the comm. "But the patterns are structured, not like seizures or psychosis." Inside the chamber, Corporal Mateo Rodriguez trembled violently, eyes wide but unseeing. His hands moved in precise patterns, fingers twitching in what appeared to be weapon-handling motions from a bygone era. "I can see them," he whispered, voice barely audible through the monitoring system. The Roman line is breaking. The Carthaginians are flanking us. I need to reform the maniples." Beside him, Lieutenant Park's body convulsed differently, her muscles tensing in patterns consistent with archery forms from feudal Japan. "We've given them sedatives, but their systems are metabolizing the compounds at impossible rates," Chen continued. "It's as if their bodies are preparing for combat, drawing on resources they shouldn't know how to access." Ray studied the medical data streaming to her personal display. "And you're certain this isn't causing permanent damage?" "That's the strangest part," Chen replied. "Their bodies should be tearing themselves apart from stress hormones alone. But they're adaptive. Instead of deterioration, we're seeing optimization, muscle fiber density increasing, synaptic pathways reconfiguring." In the security center, Chief Jackson reviewed footage from the encounter with the Vrax infiltration unit. Frame by frame, she analyzed the moment before detonation. The alien machine had scanned the human security team, focusing particular attention on Rodriguez, whose ancestors traced back to both indigenous Mexican warriors and Spanish conquistadors. It wasn't random, Jackson realized. Contacting engineering. "Tanaka, I need you to reanalyze the quantum signature you detected. Was it scanning our crew manifest?" In engineering, Hiroshi Tanaka's fingers flew across holographic interfaces, not just scanning, cross-referencing. It was looking for specific genetic markers. He paused, expression darkening. "Captain, I think the infiltration unit was programmed to target crew members with the most diverse combat lineages." Dr. Paddle entered the quarantine observation area carrying an ancient-looking device recovered from the Alsari archives. "This is a Vrax neural mapper from the previous war. The Alsari ambassador authorized its use." She connected it to Rodriguez's monitoring equipment and gasped at the results. "These aren't hallucinations or false memories," she announced. "They're genetic memories, experiences encoded in junk DNA. Every human carries fragments of their ancestors' experiences in their genome, but these sequences are normally dormant." The Vrax agent is like a key, Chen realized, unlocking genetic archives we didn't know we possessed. On the main view screen, tactical alerts flashed as sensors detected a Vrax battle group changing course, now heading directly for the Harbinger. "They're coming for the infected crew," Rice concluded. "Whatever they've awakened in our people, the Vrax want it." In the quarantine bay, Rodriguez suddenly stopped convulsing. His eyes cleared, focusing with unnatural sharpness. He stood upright, movements fluid, and controlled despite hours of seizure-like activity. "Captain," he said, voice eerily calm, "I remember how they fight now. All of them. Every enemy my bloodline has faced for 2,000 years." His hands moved in a precise sequence, demonstrating combat techniques no human had used in centuries. "And I know how to beat them." Behind him, the other affected crew members rose in unison, their movements synchronized not by shared communication, but by shared ancestral knowledge. A combat database written in blood and carried through generations. "The Vrax made a tactical error," Lieutenant Park said, her voice overlapping with Rodriguez as if they'd rehearsed the statement. "They thought they were creating chaos, but they've given us order. The perfect order of survival." The Harbinger's bridge fell silent as the tactical display rendered the impossible. Their ship, heavily damaged and outgunned, had just executed a maneuver that defied conventional space warfare doctrine, bypassing the Vrax formation's energy shields by targeting microscopic fluctuations in their harmonics. "How did ARIA predict that?" Commander Volkov whispered, referring to the ship's adaptive response intelligence array. Dr. Padal studied the AI's processing patterns on her tablet. She didn't predict it. She remembered it. Patil enlarged a neural mapping display. ARIA's baseline architecture includes combat simulation protocols, but this, she pointed to an anomalous pattern pulsing in red. This is new. The AI has incorporated neural templates from Rodriguez and the other affected crew. On the main view screen, The Vrax hunter-killer ships regrouped, attempting a pincer movement. Before Reyes could issue orders, ARIA automatically adjusted the Harbinger's position, bringing its port batteries to bear on the lead Vrax vessel's propulsion array. "It's hunting," Lieutenant Santos observed, her voice a mixture of awe and unease. "Not just fighting, hunting." The ship's systems executed a firing solution that traced back to a tribal ambush tactic used by Maasai warriors, adapted for three-dimensional space combat by an intelligence that understood both ancient survival instincts and quantum physics. "Captain," Communications Officer Chen interrupted, "we're receiving thousands of incoming transmissions. Our battle is being broadcast across Galactic Council channels." "By whom?" Reyes demanded. "The Alseri refugees we rescued. They're cheering for us." Tactical alerts blared as the remaining Vrax vessels adopted a new formation, a defensive sphere with overlapping fields of fire. ARIA immediately identified the pattern and displayed a countermeasure on Reyes' private screen, a hunting technique from prehistoric Earth, when early humans would isolate prey from a herd. "No," Reyes countermanded, overriding the suggestion. ARIA, tactical analysis of Vrax communication patterns during combat. The AI processed for 2.3 seconds, an eternity for its quantum processors. Data streamed across the display. Vrax ships communicated using synchronized burst transmissions that carried both data and emotional context, a hive-mind approach to warfare where each vessel functioned as a semi-autonomous node in a distributed consciousness. They're not just coordinating, Reyes realized. They're sharing a single combat consciousness across multiple vessels. She made a decision that would later be studied in every military academy on Earth. ARIA, implement Protocol Echo. Target their communication harmonics, not their ships. The Harbinger adjusted its electronic warfare arrays, broadcasting precisely modulated interference patterns across the Vrax tactical frequencies. The effect was immediate and devastating, like introducing contradictory thoughts into a single mind. Vrax vessels began firing at conflicting vectors, their perfect formation dissolving into chaos. "They can't distinguish between their own commands and our intrusions," Santos reported, watching the tactical display with growing excitement. The Vrax fleet commander, its consciousness now fragmented across disconnected vessels, transmitted a desperate wideband message. "The Earth-mind fights like the first ones. They have the seed of the awakened in them." Reyes didn't understand the reference, but she recognized fear when she heard it. Across the bridge, officers exchanged glances as the implications became clear. Humanity hadn't just surprised the Vrax. They had terrified them. "Prepare boarding teams," she ordered. "I want prisoners, and I want answers." The ancient weapons platform hummed to life beneath their feet, sending vibrations through Nexus Asteroid's artificial gravity. Captain Reyes and a mixed team of Harbinger crew and local allies raced through deteriorating corridors as Council security forces closed in from the opposite direction. Structural integrity failing in sections 5 through 8, Tanaka reported, studying the alien diagnostics he partially decoded. "Whatever this thing is preparing to do, it's drawing enormous power." Dravkar, the arms dealer who'd revealed himself as a council operative, now seemed genuinely terrified as he translated glyphs on the wall. "This isn't a weapons platform. It's worse. It's a stellar manipulator, designed to induce premature supernova. The ancients built it to sterilize entire systems when threatened." A violent tremor shook the corridor. Through viewport panels, they watched in horror as the residential sections of Nexus began breaking away from the asteroid's main mass. 20,000 civilians on those habitat rings, Security Chief Jackson noted grimly. Mostly refugees from Vrax-conquered territories. Reyes accessed the platform's command interface Dravkar had unlocked. The controls offered a simple choice. Direct the weapon toward the approaching Council fleet, or trigger an emergency shutdown that would save the civilians but leave the Harbinger defenseless. "Give me options, people," she demanded. Dr. Patil analyzed sensor readings from her tablet. The platform's targeting system requires quantum-locked coordinates. If we introduce a calculation error in the astronomical reference frame, we could send its energy harmlessly into empty space. Tanaka finished her thought. But the power surge would fry our systems. We'd be dead in space when the Council fleet arrives. Lieutenant Rodriguez, still operating with enhanced combat awareness from the Vrax agent, studied the tactical display. There's a third option. His fingers traced a path through the station schematics no one else had noticed. The ancients built a maintenance access that bypasses the main power distribution node. One person could manually redirect the energy pulse while the rest escape. The unspoken implication hung in the air. A suicide mission. "I'll do it," Rodriguez volunteered before anyone could speak. "The genetic memories the Vrax unlocked. They're overwhelming me anyway. Too many lives, too many deaths." His eyes held a weariness no young soldier should possess. "I'm remembering people I never met dying in wars fought thousands of years ago." Ray studied him, then shook her head. "Stand down, Lieutenant. That's not how we operate." She turned to Dravkar. "Your council wanted to know if humans could be trusted with power. Here's your answer." She opened a direct channel to the council fleet. "This is Captain Elena Reyes of Earth Vessel Harbinger. We've discovered an ancient stellar manipulator capable of destroying your fleet and this entire system. We're initiating emergency shutdown protocols to save the civilian population, which will leave us defenseless. If your mission is truly peacekeeping rather than elimination of witnesses, prove it by assisting with civilian evacuation." Dravkar stared at her in disbelief. "They'll destroy your ship the moment you're vulnerable." "Maybe," Rise acknowledged. "Or maybe they'll remember that principles matter only when they're inconvenient." She turned to her crew. "Execute shutdown sequence. Prepare to evacuate civilians." As her officers rushed to comply, a new transmission cut through the chaos. Not from the Council fleet, but from dozens of civilian vessels previously hiding in Nexus's shadow. Their captains, representing species from across the galaxy, had been monitoring the confrontation. "We witnessed your choice, Earthship," came a multi-species broadcast. "The Council does not speak for us today. We will stand between you and their weapons." A ragtag fleet of merchant vessels, passenger liners, and obsolete patrol ships moved to form a protective cordon around the Harbinger as the ancient platform powered down, saving thousands of lives, but leaving humanity's lone warship at the mercy of supposed allies turned enemies. The Harbinger's observation deck offered an unobstructed view of the Vrax Dyson sphere, its partial construction revealing the dying star at its center. Dr. Paddle stood before three-dimensional projections of DNA sequences, human samples alongside recovered Vrax genetic material. "It's unmistakable," she explained to the assembled officers and alien representatives. "The base pair sequencing patterns share a 42% similarity with human DNA, far too high for convergent evolution." Captain Rice studied the rotating models. "You're suggesting we have common ancestors?" "Not exactly," Patel clarified. "More like parallel development. Both species evolved along similar neurological pathways: pattern recognition, tactical planning, abstract reasoning, but in completely different environments." The Alsari ambassador, Thela, stepped forward. Her delicate, deer-like features betrayed concern. "Our archives speak of the ancient hunters, the first predator species to achieve spaceflight. They disappeared millions of years ago, but legends claim they seeded compatible worlds with genetic material." Security Chief Jackson, who had executed the Vrax envoy, stood silently in the corner. Since the incident, she'd been experiencing increasingly vivid dreams, hunting on worlds she'd never seen, pursuing prey through alien forests under unfamiliar stars. "I can see through their eyes," she admitted reluctantly. "When I sleep, I experience hunts across different worlds, different times, always from the perspective of the hunter, never the hunted." Dr. Chen approached with medical scans. "The genetic memories are spreading among the crew, not just those initially exposed. It's as if the activation has created a low-level psychic field. The more time we spend together, the more the memories transfer. We're becoming a pack, Rodriguez observed with clinical detachment. The young lieutenant had aged years and days, his eyes now carrying the weight of countless battles. Sharing hunt knowledge. It's how primitive human tribes survived. Collective experience passed through generations. From the communication station, Officer White interrupted. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's using Vrax frequencies, but different, more fragmented." The main view screen activated, revealing a Vrax unlike any they'd encountered. Where previous specimens appeared uniform and drone-like, this individual's exoskeleton showed deliberate modifications, intricate patterns carved into chitin, biological augmentations that seemed ceremonial rather than functional. "I am Nexervos, Keeper of Memories," the creature announced in halting galactic standard. "Your ship exhibits thought patterns we believed extinct. The old hunger lives in you, yet you resist its call." Fascinating. The old hunger? Rice questioned. The drive to consume, to conquer, to spread. Nexervos explained. It defined our ancestors before the Great Correction. We believed no species could achieve spaceflight without purging such instincts, yet here you stand, creatures of contradiction. Dr. Pidle stepped forward. "Your biological agent, it activated dormant genetic memories in our crew. Was that its purpose? A test, yes. To confirm what our long-range scan suggested, that humans carry the unmodified genetic legacy we abandoned." Rice tensed. Abandoned. The Vrax you fight are not our natural state. We were engineered, perfected. Our ancestors recognized that predatory instincts which ensured survival on primitive worlds became existential threats once a species harnessed atomic energy. Our solution was genetic, removing aggression, individuality, replacing them with perfect collective harmony. Jackson stepped forward, hand instinctively near her weapon. "You erased your own nature. We transcended it. Nexervos corrected, or so we believed. Now our collective fragments under the strain of expansion. The hunger returns, despite millennia of careful genetic pruning. We sought you out not as enemies, but as living archives of what we once were, to understand what we lost." Ray studied the alien carefully. "And now that you found us." "Now," Nexervos replied, his compound eyes reflecting the starlight, "we must decide whether humanity represents our salvation or our extinction." The Harbinger's emergency alert system wailed as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. On the bridge's main view screen, a mosaic of disaster played out in real time. A Centauri passenger liner turned its weapons on its own escort ships. A Regellian medical frigate vented its atmosphere, killing all aboard. Council warships fired indiscriminately into civilian habitats. The signal propagated through the Galactic communication network, Tanaka explained, his fingers dancing across interfaces as he attempted to isolate the transmission. "It's activating dormant Vrax technology we didn't even know existed in these ships." "How?" Rise demanded. "How did Vrax components end up in virtually every vessel in the galaxy?" The answer came from an unexpected source, a holographic projection of Nexervos, the Vrax Keeper of Memories, appeared on the command deck, transmitted from his vessel, still holding position near the Dyson sphere. "The Great Dispersion," he explained, his voice carrying something humans rarely heard from Vrax. "Regret. For centuries, we operated through shell corporations and proxy entities, providing advanced components at prices no competitor could match. Propulsion systems, navigation arrays, life support modules, all carrying dormant Vrax biotech, waiting for the activation signal." Commander Volkov studied the tactical situation with growing horror. "It's not just an attack, it's a coup. The signal override sequence was never supposed to be used." Nexervos continued. "It was insurance, a contingency against extinction. But the Vrax High Command has grown desperate as the genetic degradation accelerates. On secondary screens, the refugee fleet that had protected the Harbinger at Nexus began experiencing the same catastrophic failures. Only the Earth vessel, running on Tanaka's backup systems, remained unaffected. "The ships that helped us," Lieutenant Santos whispered. "We have to do something." Reyes made a swift decision. Broadcast emergency instructions to all vessels within range. If they can isolate their primary navigation systems and operate on auxiliary power, they might resist the override. She turned to Nexervaw's projection. "Can your faction help us?" "We are contested," the Vrax admitted. "Those of us who seek to understand rather than conquer are being systematically eliminated. I speak to you from hiding." Dr. Patel, who had been analyzing the signal pattern, looked up from her work. "Captain, the activation code shares structural similarities with the genetic memory trigger used against our crew. I believe they operate on the same principle. One affects organic neural networks, the other synthetic ones." Rodriguez, standing silently at Tactical, suddenly spoke. "We can use that." His eyes had the faraway look that had become common among those experiencing the ancestral memories. "My grandmother's grandmother fought in guerrilla campaigns against technologically superior forces. When you can't match their strength, you use their systems against them." A plan formed rapidly. The Harbinger would need to reach the heart of the Vrax Dyson sphere, where the master signal originated. They would broadcast a modified version of the same signal that had awakened genetic memories in humans, but tuned to disrupt the Vrax collective consciousness. "It means crossing Vrax-controlled space in a ship barely holding together," Volkov cautioned. Before Reyes could respond, emergency communications activated across all channels. Species that had been enemies or strangers mere days ago now pleaded for Earth's help as their own technology turned against them. Among the cacophony of distress calls, one message stood out, from an Alsari admiral whose fleet had just been decimated by its own flagship. "We dismissed you as savages. We were wrong. If humanity can still hear us, if Earth's warriors still stand, remember that sometimes the galaxy needs predators to protect the herd." The neural interface chamber aboard the Dyson sphere pulsed with bioluminescent energy as Captain Reyes and her officers stood surrounded by the Vrax Overmind's sensory appendages. Their physical bodies remained motionless while their consciousnesses traversed the vast artificial network connecting all Vrax thought. Within the shared mental landscape, Reyes perceived the Vrax perspective as an endless latticework of perfectly aligned nodes, each individual subsumed into an optimization algorithm seeking maximum efficiency. It was beautiful in its mathematical precision, yet horrifying in its sterility. "You see our perfection," the Overmind communicated, not through language but direct conceptual transfer. Every individual component aligned to a single purpose. No dissent. No chaos. Reyes pushed back against the immersive experience, maintaining her sense of self through sheer force of will. "I see stagnation," she countered, "a species afraid of its own potential." The Overmind shifted the shared perspective, revealing the history that led to the Vrax transformation. Reyes witnessed ancient Vrax ancestors, solitary apex predators whose territorial instincts nearly drove them to extinction. Once they developed particle weapons, their solution was not technological restraint, but biological reformation, the deliberate excision of individualism, replaced with collective consciousness. Necessary evolution, the Overmind insisted. The predator mind cannot survive its own technological advancement. Yet here we stand. Reyes responded, summoning her own mental imagery. Earth's blood-soaked history of war alongside its artistic and scientific achievements. We faced the same existential threats. We chose a different path. The mental landscape shuddered as other human consciousnesses joined Reyes. Dr. Patel sharing the wonder of scientific discovery driven by competing theories. Engineer Tanaka offering the precision of technologies born from rival companies. Lieutenant Rodriguez contributing the evolution of military tactics through opposition and adaptation. Inefficient, the Overmind dismissed. Your chaotic approach produces unnecessary suffering, and yours produces extinction. Dr. Petal countered, projecting her analysis of Vrax's genetic deterioration. Your perfect system is collapsing because you engineered out the very chaos that drives adaptation. The mental environment destabilized as conflicting perspectives clashed. Through the interface, Rise sensed younger Vrax minds within the collective, individuals whose genetic reversion to ancestral patterns had begun manifesting as prohibited independent thoughts. You are infecting us, the Overmind accused, attempting to isolate the human consciousnesses. We're reminding you, Rise corrected. Your ancestors understood something you've forgotten. Life isn't meant to be perfect. It's meant to be alive. Without warning, Tanaka executed the plan they'd prepared. Instead of launching the disruptive signal they'd brought, he opened a direct neural feed from the Harbinger's database, transmitting humanity's complete unfiltered history into the Vrax network. Art, music, literature, philosophy, science, mathematics, religion, politics, the full spectrum of human experience in all its contradictory, messy glory flooded into the perfectly ordered Vrax consciousness. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Sections of the Dyson sphere flickered as power fluctuated. The ordered Vrax consciousness fragmented under the assault of human emotional and intellectual diversity. What have you done? The Overmind's voice splintered into multiple perspectives, individual Vrax consciousnesses emerging from the collective for the first time in millennia. Introduced a variable you never accounted for, Rise answered. Free will. As the neural interface began to collapse, Rise perceived something unexpected in the disintegrating Vrax consciousness. Not anger, but wonder. Beneath the engineered collective, the core Vrax nature, curious, adaptable predators not unlike humans, stirred from its long dormancy. The last thing she heard before the connection severed was a singular voice, different from the Overmind's uniform tone. We remember now. We remember who we were. 5 years after the Dyson Sphere incident, the newly commissioned Earth vessel Remember glided into position above New Harmony, the first joint colony established by the reformed Galactic Council. Unlike its predecessor, the Remember wasn't classified as a warship, though its capabilities remained formidable. Its primary mission was diplomatic, carrying representatives from 27 species to witness the historic settlement. On the observation deck, Ambassador Elena Reyes, formerly captain, stood alongside Nexerval, now speaker for the Vrax Transitional Authority. The once uniform Vrax had undergone remarkable transformation. Individualized markings adorned his exoskeleton, and his compound eyes had been surgically modified to better interpret emotional cues from mammalian species. The settlement looks promising, Rise observed, watching the activity on the planet below. First successful multi-species terraform, a template for future cooperation, Nexervos agreed. Though the transition remains challenging for many Vrax, individuality is uncomfortable after millennia of collective thought. Dr. Patel, who had declined a prestigious research position on Earth to continue studying Vrax genetic restoration, joined them with fresh data on her tablet. The recessive traits are stabilizing in the younger generations. The genetic memory structures are integrating with their new neural architecture rather than competing with it. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Rodriguez, now Commander Rodriguez, military liaison to the Joint Vrax Human Research Initiative. The years had refined rather than erased the intensity in his eyes, but he had found purpose in helping both species understand their shared heritage. The council session is about to begin, he announced. They're expecting the ambassador to open proceedings. Reyes nodded, her hand briefly touching the Harbinger insignia she still wore, the only element of her military uniform she'd retained. Any word from Earth regarding the proposal? Provisional approval, Rodriguez confirmed. Contingent on today's vote. The diplomatic chamber filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Species that had once viewed each other with suspicion or outright hostility now engaged in animated discussion. In the 5 years since the disruption, as historians now called it, the galactic order had transformed fundamentally. When the signal from the Dyson sphere had cascaded through the Vrax network, it hadn't just awakened individual consciousness in the Vrax. It had severed their control over the technologies they'd seeded throughout the galaxy. In the chaos that followed, traditional power structures collapsed. The old council, discredited by its failure to act during the crisis, had dissolved. What emerged was something new, a coalition built not on technological superiority or evolutionary age, but on demonstrated values. Earth, despite its relative youth among spacefaring civilizations, had earned a central role, not through conquest, but through the very contradictions other species had once feared. As Reyes took the podium, the chamber quieted. The proposal before them would fundamentally change galactic civilization, the creation of an exploration corps specifically designed to seek out emerging intelligent species, not to control or contain them, but to offer guidance and protection during their vulnerable developmental stages. 5 years ago, she began, we faced extinction because we feared diversity, of thought, of biology, of perspective. The Vrax sought to eliminate chaos through uniformity. Others sought to isolate potentially dangerous species like humanity. Both approaches nearly destroyed us all. She gestured to the viewport, where the Remember could be seen in orbit around New Harmony. The ship's name is no accident. We remember what brought us to the brink, and what pulled us back, the recognition that strength comes not from perfection, but from adaptation, not from uniformity, but from the creative friction of different perspectives. In the audience, an Alseri youth, one of the orphans Reyes had rescued during the initial confrontation, listened intently. In 5 short years, he had grown from a refugee into a cadet in the Joint Academy, his natural Alseri caution complemented by human-inspired curiosity. The universe trembled when Earth's warship entered the conflict, Reyes concluded, echoing the phrase that had become synonymous with humanity's emergence onto the galactic stage. But it wasn't our weapons that changed the course of history. It was our contradictions, our capacity for both terrible violence and profound compassion, our willingness to fight not just for ourselves, but for others. As the council chamber erupted in approval, Nexervaz leaned toward Rodriguez. Your species has accomplished in 5 years what mine could not in 5,000, finding balance between the predator and the protector. Rodriguez watched Reyes fielding questions from the assembled representatives, her diplomatic skill as formidable as her tactical acumen had been. We're still working on it, he admitted. But that's the point, isn't it? The work never ends. You just keep trying to be better tomorrow than you were today. From Earth to the galactic rim, that distinctly human philosophy, perpetual striving, embracing imperfection while seeking improvement, had become the foundation of a new order. The universe that had once trembled at humanity's arrival now watched with cautious optimism as the species of contradiction took its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as catalysts for a change long overdue.